Hello and welcome, my name is Myre and it's that time again. It's time for the Star Citizen monthly report for July 2021. In this video we're going to go ahead and have a look at what all the different studios have done, and if you don't necessarily want to keep up with every single studio, for the YouTube video, I'm going to have this done in segments so you can mouse over on the timeline there and choose what things you want to watch or what you want to hear about in particular. For everybody else, we're going to be going through everything and discussing things as we go through. All right, let's get into it. So, let's skip the intro. Let's read on for the exciting details. Obviously, it's going to start with this, which is the Grim Hex Health. This is maybe a screenshot, or I don't think it's concept art. If it is, it's like a concept screen. What's funny is that it says GRIMP Health. You know, like a Grim Hex is called Grim Hex because like it's Green Imperial, and then like they just shortened it, right? But this one is Grimp. This is Grimp Health. So I think they might have to remove that P or something like that. But yeah. Alright, so first off we have AI content. So July's PU report starts with AI content who received a large amount of data from a recent mocap shoot. Last month they talked about how they had a week-long mocap shoot doing a whole bunch of stuff. So the vendor behavior was the first to be addressed, with the team finishing the first polish pass alongside design who sanity checked the coffee shop setup. The next steps are to internally review the behavior with final data, retarget it onto the female skeleton, and a complete look at IK pass. So it looks like with the mocap shoot they did, they only had the one male actor, and they're just retargeting it onto a female skeleton, as opposed to doing it for the male and female. So I guess saving money there on two actors and that kind of thing, and just giving us the what we want to see. So I guess look forward to seeing new vendors and new vendor motions, and maybe less. Hi, welcome to the store. Feel free to look around. We have a real good selection, because I hate that crap so much. Anyway, so the doctor and nurse elements of the medical behavior received data too, which is currently being implemented and polished. The doctor is now set up to react to the player respawning and entering the room in flow, while the nurse inspects the relevant usables. Dialogue and facial animations to match the flow will be addressed shortly. So AI content also rectified bugs for Alpha 3.14 with a focus on Orizin's Voyager bar. Some feature work was put on hold to sanity check the setups and bring the AI to a better standard for release. Finally, they kicked off the pre-production of future behaviors with outpost, hospital, and patron behaviors, all well received by the directors. Alright, so just in short, cool stuff. And it does look like when we do get medical gameplay in 3.15, the doctors and nurses and some of that stuff is gonna be there on day one for what they will likely call the tier 0 implementation of it, which is really nice. Alright, so AI features. So last month the AI feature team primarily focused on reviewing combat, with the aim of refining the existing behaviors and functionality to provide a more intelligible and enjoyable experience. The first part of this was reviewing the settings for perception and reactions to give the designers greater control over how the AI behaves when encountering a stimulus. I know how I behave when I encounter a stimulus. Anyway, next they worked on the basic combat behaviors, ensuring cover selection is working as intended and that the AI provides a base level of functionality after the first reaction to the enemy. Alright, so often the majority of the technology for improving combat already exists. It's more a case of reviewing very specific situations and ensuring that the AI behaves as intended and fixing sometimes simple bugs that produce bad behavior. From these beginnings, we hope to do a full review over all of the combat behaviors, which will lead to a better and more enjoyable gameplay. Nice. They also worked on specific behaviors to enable AI to spread out and surround the player and taunt them while in melee combat. Interesting. I wonder what use case this is for. Maybe prison. This required changes to the tactical point system to support a new metric allowing them to weight points spread from other AI. Melee behaviors received attention to ensure they quickly switch to combat when the situation requires them to. So this is AI, so not necessarily AI pirates or AI humans. This could also mean AI bugs and other pack creatures that could surround the player and then maybe one attack after the other and that kind of thing. We'll have to wait and see. Finally, the animators continued working on the speed protocol and polish stages for the mocapped cowering and surrendering animations for the civilian NPCs. This will be useful for both unarmed and untrained AI and the AI combat behaviors currently under review. So right now, again, we currently just have the one kind of AI, the I see you, you're dead kind of AI. But they do want to have a whole gamut of different AI styles, of which, of course, is also going to include this. Although I wouldn't expect to see this in-game until we get server meshing and until we get the servers in general just being a little bit less taxed than they currently are. In AI tech, the AI tech enabled the planetary navigation system to make connections between adjacent mesh tiles, which is part of the base work to add support for planetary pathfinding. This means that triangles from a navigation mesh tile will create links to triangles from other adjacent tiles at the generation step. All in all, just to help in order to make the AI be able to go from space to planet and planet to space and just be smooth about it so you can follow them. And this is going to be very important when VNPCs are a thing, or virtual NPCs with their own lives and stories to tell and that kind of thing. They updated the tile generator debug drawer to also work with planetary navigation mesh tiles to help them debug issues that could appear during the planet mesh generation step. Work was submitted to allow NPCs to push a trolley along a path. The work for this includes playing an animation to connect the trolley, selecting a path, pushing the trolley along the path, disconnecting from the trolley at the end, and moving away. For movement with the trolley, the team considered the size of the agent for collision avoidance and looked at the animations used for pushing it uphill and downhill, or when the NPC needs to turn the trolley to orient it with the path. So this is going to be useful twofold, but I'm sure as time goes on, it'll have more applications. But this is going to be useful not only just for NPCs pushing trolleys in your hangar for when they want to physicalize all that stuff and make it so that when you want to actually go about stocking your ship with stuff, or just having your hangars look more lively, or even do stuff that has physical need, it'll be there. But also for medical gameplay, there's obviously going to be this. And I say medical gameplay, I mean in the hospitals, for pushing the gurneys, for when you were delivering the downed NPCs from missions, or down players even, who knows, then the NPCs will be able to move those gurneys around using this exact same tech. As for, you know, on the field and that kind of stuff, when you're moving around a trolley, let's say for box missions and stuff, they've already addressed that maybe perhaps wheels aren't the best idea. So we'll likely have like Gravlev gurneys and Gravlev trolleys for that as well. But I'm sure this technology that's gone into having the wheels be perfectly simulated will go well into doing other things, you know, like for instance, the landing gear of certain ships and that kind of thing, though. So work was also done to automate testing by extending functionality to the flow graph to use references to other entities inside the same object container. Related to this, the AI teams began creating small levels to test behaviors that will be enabled later for automated testing, which will ultimately provide better stability to the systems. The previously mentioned collision avoidance work continued in July, this time on performance optimization and creating cleaner functionality. Time was also dedicated to improving quantum travel behavior in a group. Now, the leader checks that all participants, including the player if they are part of the group, has finished spooling before sending the signal to jump. So some cool quantum linking information and stuff in there as well. That's neat. So yeah, quantum splitting is just not quantum splitting, quantum linking is a very interesting thing that I don't think they fully realized yet in the game. It's very cool to see them still working on it actively here. So development of the subsumption editor continued too, with the AI tech adding functionality to watch or modify multiple subsumption functions from the same view, which was named the multi-graph view. They also adjusted save functionality to work alongside it. So subsumption is this umbrella term for all the tech that goes into like AI, NPCs, and like everything in between. So like the archetype system and everything else. So animation. So throughout July, the animation team looked into the usables used throughout the PU and how they're laid out. They then created track view based previs videos showing existing assets used in better ways, such as using the rail leaning at the bar counter, created poses for usables that don't already exist, such as beatdowns in prison, and drove the... Wait, beatdowns in prison? Okay. So animations for, I guess, NPCs beating down other NPCs, and drove the visual feel of AI layout in certain areas. So far, this has been completed for prisons, medical locations, so hopefully we don't see doctors beating down patients, but you never know, shanty towns, cassava stores, and the G-Lock bar. The goal of this is to meld the animation and design disciplines together to lay out existing and new animations in a way that simulates how humans behave. Alright, so art characters. So July saw character art progress with new in-shop armor for subscriber armor and helmets. The team began designing cybernetics and wrapped up a new outfit for shopkeepers and inhabitants of Pyro, the latter of which were passed on to the character art team. So this is definitely something that's now in the road to CitizenCon kind of like a shelf. Cybernetics is a big thing. We've seen the Eddie Parr like bartender mission giver in Microtech, who has, or in at least his concept, had those weird cybernetics there. Cybernetics are supposed to give players actual functions in the game, I believe. They might just be cosmetic, I'm not too sure, but we'll likely hear more about that very soon. Alongside work on characters, Tech Art supported actor features in delivering a medical gown asset and medical skeleton. They also supported UI with shader and R&D and provided exports of all character assets in support of the physical inventory UI. The backpacks mentioned in previous reports were completed too, including ensuring they appear correctly on characters and in shops. What kind of backpacks are they? Because we already have the integrated backpacks, that of the Greycat RL suit and its integrated backpack, that of the MacFlex Core and its integrated backpack, but they've also mentioned other backpacks as well. How will they work? And when it comes to things like EVA, you know, your character EVAs because of the exposed EVA ports. Will they interact? Will they block? How will they work? What's also interesting here is that they've done a whole medical skeleton. This doesn't just mean like a skeleton you'll see when you wake up in the med bay and it's just there in the corner looking at you creepy like, but this is actually intended and necessary for the medical shader as well. When you use the scanner and you look over a character's body and see if they've got any broken bones, this way, when you have that thing scanning over a player, you will literally see a skeleton over the shader. And that's how you'll be able to like say, oh, they've got a cracked skull or something, which is kind of neat. All right, in environments, July saw the environment art team continuing to polish Pyro's planets and moons to the expected quality standards. In Montreal, the team progressed with the gray box phase for the Rest Stop and Grimhex medical clinics. Devs can now walk into both locations and experience the correct mood, volumes, and flow. The Rest Stop clinics were the ideal opportunity to start working on module-based locations, which involves covering many rest stops with a restricted library of medical modules. Area 18 and Lorville's hospitals are approaching white box complete. These locations are much larger in scope and require adaptation and revisiting to ensure they live up to their potential. So the locations team says, as the scope of these is closer to those of New Babbage and Orison, we want to make sure that these volumes and general feeling of the areas are spot on before moving on to the detail pass. On the design side, the team further supported hospitals by ensuring the flow is fully operational and populating the locations of AI. In parallel, they iterated on the creation and placement of the derelict spaceship puzzles mentioned in the last month's report. They mentioned, I think, like several dozen, like maybe 7 planetary, 7 space puzzles for when you go ahead and you are inspecting crash sites and stuff. These puzzles, so when they say puzzle, they mean like the entire like geometry of the ship is a jump puzzle or like a locomotion puzzle. will ultimately be scattered across planets and space and will represent minor points of interest. They're currently in the proof of concept phase, with the team investigating various future opportunities. In ship art, the US-based ships team began the month preparing the constellation Taurus for release. They also resolved bugs affecting various ships across the fleet. Alongside release prep, ships pushed other vehicles through the pipeline, including both Crusader Ares variants, which we saw parts of in the ISC video today, as well which entered the final art stages. The Drake Vulture continued to progress through the white box phase. An all-new vehicle entered the pipeline, completely new, hey? And the upcoming variants mentioned in last month's report moved into gray box. So there is a ship that we currently have in-game, playable right now, that's getting a secret variant. Now, they've talked about this considerably more than they talked about the Cyclone MTs variant, so I'm thinking maybe perhaps it's actually a ship, of which now I'm going, which one? Because people think maybe it might be the Starfarer, maybe the Starfarer might be able to refine something different, but it's all very much just like rumors right now. Nobody really knows. In the UK, last month's yet-to-be-announced ship has its damage, LODs, and final art completed. Last month's yet-to-be-announced ship, so it looks like for either CitizenCon, which is a very big likely, or at least the IAE, we're going to be getting a whole new unannounced ship coming out. Complete flight ready, it seems. With the team currently wrapping up the finishing touches before handing it over to the tech art teams and other downstream teams. The Redeemer received its exterior damage meshes and a final polish pass. The team are currently working on the exterior LODs while the interior is going through its final art pass, with the cockpit turrets and lower level nearing completion. Alright, and here's a look at that Redeemer again, looking very much like a Pelican from like Halo meets like a Vanguard. It just kind of looks like a Vanguard variant, and honestly, that's really good. You know, like they've managed to like get that style in from the next best starship into what looks like another ship from the lineup of Aegis ships, you know, from that same generation. It looks neat. Now, I wasn't quite sure about this before. Obviously, from this angle here, we can't really see the garlic presser like nacelles, which make up the lower part of this ship. They're like blocked by just the angle of it all, but this looks really promising. So a yes to be announced, yes, you can keep teasing us, CIG, we like that kind of thing, that the team is excited to share, move to white box to great, so it's another one, while the Saber's cockpit and lighting were wrapped up. For the Retaliator, the first round of interior gold standard work is coming to a close. Nice. With the interior spaces corrected for metrics and AI navigation. New ship item compartments were added and the cockpit received a pass too. So we've seen gold standard stuff being implemented slowly to the Saber, this 314 PTU, with the cockpit not yet addressed, and with certain things like the shield housing not necessarily being where it needs to be just yet. I'm going to be making a full video on this and gold standard and Star Citizen and what it means in the future. Look forward to that. I think that's going to be in my next original video for YouTube. But yeah, let's have a look and see if maybe perhaps there are any images of this. There's obviously some video footage of this in an ISC that I'll look for the video I'm going to be making. But this is the cockpit, at least, of the Retaliator here, it seems. And it's, I mean, I need to have a look at what the Retaliator looks like in game. It looks like the canopy. It looks like they've added more struts, eh? Like, it's looking interesting for sure. But we'll have to wait and see what it looks like in game. All right, so another unannounced ship is deep in the gray box phase. And the ship team says that with some issues with its exterior mechanisms now resolved, it's moving through the pipeline well. There are a number of artists working together on this one, and each area of the ship's interior is coming along nicely. All right, so I'm expecting a ship with a complex exterior. Whenever they talk about exterior mechanisms, it can mean anything from like VTOL thrusters to like transformations on the Xi'an ship, so who knows? It's unannounced. All right, then with weapons, the weapon art team, the weapon content team has another busy month, completing the 2 size 7 bearing weapons for the Crusader Ares before closing out bugs for Alpha 3.14. Work also kicked off for a new size 3 bomb for the A2 Starlifter and a variant for the mounted weapon turret for the an upcoming ship. So they talked about how they wanted to add more variety for the kinds of bombs you can use for the A2. They want the mother of all bomb stuff that you can only like have like 3 or 4 on, but they also want like a complement of smaller ones. And we saw a proof of concept of bombing working in Star Citizen in this week's ISC, which was really cool. Alright, so the audio team. So the audio team began July working on Grim Hex's Medical Center, which received, or Grimp Hex's Medical Center, which received effects and music passes to help compound the rundown aesthetic. They also added effects to the A2 Starlifter, including the onboard kitchen. The dialogue team recorded VO and is currently preparing to go in-game. Okay. The technical sound design team made improvements to dogfighting and ship weapons. When live, players will hear weapons from a greater distance, and the battles themselves will sound more intense, which will most be noticeable in Arena Commander because you'll have more ships and more like player-dense locations in Arena Commander than you would generally have in the verse. But if you were to have, say, 24 people in the verse and do one thing, it'll be similar. We've actually heard some of this already in the PTU, although it was more noticeable planet side, which Arena Commander has none of, because they've actually included things like echo. Like when you shoot a gun, there's now a report sound. Like you wait like a half a second, and if you're like near the planet, you actually hear an echo report back to you, and it sounds really good. Like in third person, it sounds great. In first person, watching ships above you fight, I'm sure it's ridiculous. But yeah. So that's that to look forward to. They also fixed some bugs in Origin. Work on the Origin score continued with composer Pedro Camacho, so it seems like they're not done with the audio and the music of Origin. So having had great results from the planetary and industrial platform pieces, they're looking to complete the location with a final piece for the spaceport. So at the spaceport currently, it plays like that, I believe it's called, I forget what it's called, but you know that like that orchestral kind of choir, like hymn thing. So that plays when you're in the spaceport. It's a bit epic, but maybe a bit too epic for a spaceport, so they're working on that. The spaceport also received ambiances, as did the wind sculpture. Audio also created sounds for the RSI Constellation Taurus trailer. Okay, so with 3.14 being released, I believe today, if Twitter is to be believed, we're going to be getting a Constellation Taurus trailer. Okay, for community, the community team began July with the finale of the Show Us Your Color celebration, putting together a selection of the best submissions into their gallery. They adding to the cosplay contest announced in June, they kicked off a video contest, the winners of which will be part of the CitizenCon show. The community also continued to update the Star Citizen public roadmap, including the notable additions of the Q3 schedule for the downstream development teams and a further look for what's coming in Alpha 3.17, all of which we've looked at already, so you can find that on our YouTube channel. In the lead up to the release of Alpha 3.14, a series of patch watch posts were shared on Spectrum, highlighting some of the specific ship changes and tuning going into the latest update. Additionally, a post-mortem on Alpha 3.13 and Invictus Launch Week 2951 was published, highlighting what went well and what didn't, and what will be improved in the future. Okay, now here's for the real meat and potatoes. Here's why we have segments, which you can skip through if you want to find the next one, because this is going to be a whole lot of jargon. But in engineering, in June, the physics team finished support for compressed meshes. This means the representation of render meshes into... I've already gone there, haven't I? Which means the representation of render meshes inside physics is now compressed, leading to memory and bandwidth savings. More code, such as preparation of vertex positions and normals for planetary patches, was also moved from C++ to ISPC to allow for faster processing on the CPU, so CPU savings in short. But further optimizations include pre-allocating mesh blocks to avoid stalls during on-demand allocation, caching the current grid of vehicles to prevent stalls in physics, optimizing binding of secondary node data during CGF loading, and a new round of terrain mesh generation improvements. Additionally, the set of analytical SDF primitives supported by physics was extended and torus added. No idea what any of that means. If you do, please say something in the comments. Otherwise, yeah, it looks like they've made some performance savings here and there, as well as maybe perhaps avoiding some stalling, which I experience a lot of, or at least I have done. In 3.14's PTU, maybe not so much of, so maybe some of this engine work has already gone into fixing some of that. For the renderer, the team continued with the transition to Gen 12. A lot of work is completed on the global draw packet cache and related changes on the high-level render and 3D engine code, which will be used to speed up the streaming of object containers and sharing of data for multiple instances. Additionally, Gen 12 received the following changes: support for referencing refraction during rendering, tessellation support in the G buffer pass, and a ported Z prepass. Several pieces of legacy code were removed to simplify the renderer pipeline. Also, Gen 12 now runs with async shader compilation enabled by default. This is mostly relevant for development, but also useful in shipping builds, as the shader cache isn't fully deterministic yet, and compilation of infrequently used shaders can happen in the PU, which is why when you have certain issues like weird spines and stuff sticking out of the ground, you can go into your files and delete the shader folder, and it'll try and basically do it all again and fix those issues. Volumetric clouds and atmospherics rendering saw improvements throughout July, as well as continued research. For Alpha 3.14, several performance improvements were implemented when rendering clouds into cube maps. For example, runtime cube maps that are used for ambient lighting around the player. Density queries now also include the cloud's tint at the requested location, which is important for the seamless integration of particles into cloud volumes. Cloud shaping was changed slightly to improve the local versus global read, particularly with regards to combating the occasional tiled look of cloud details when viewed from orbit. This local versus global read, I imagine, means like when you are, in FPS, in your cockpit of your ship and the clouds are around you, versus looking at the clouds from space. It's not like Microsoft Flight Simulator where it looks beautiful and amazing because all the work is done from one kind of like perspective. It has to look good from all sorts of perspectives, including when you're not actually at the planet at all. Another thing they mentioned here about clouds, which is kind of interesting for me, was cube maps. Now, in 3.14, if you fly through a nebula, like let's say in a gas cloud of a Lagrange point, you'll notice now in third person that there are actually what looks like misty kind of like globules going past you. Now, if you look, if you pay attention to it, it's actually like a repeating thing. I believe this is what they're talking about in addressing the repetition of these cube maps and stuff within that new system. So for rendering performance, the entire filter chain that reprojects and upsamples remarching results is being revisited to improve quality so that this performance mode can always be enabled. The PU currently remarches either at full resolution, which is very taxing, or uses a simple form of lower resolution remarching, which leaves a lot to be desired in terms of quality versus gain performance. Lastly, work on sign distance field integration into the remarcher. Efficient empty space skipping is still ongoing. On the core engine side, work continued on the entity component update scheduler, or ECUS. Its internal structure was revisited to allow more than one update within a pass. Several improvements were also made to support and improve the new profiler front end that was introduced in June. For instance, CPU sampling support was added for Linux builds on the server. Moreover, several tree optimizations were made inside StarHash. Okay. No comment. So, for the characters and weapons feature team, the features team continued working on the new player inventory with daily reviews on the user experience. So the feature teams say that there are a lot of hard choices being made on what has to make it into the first release and what can be postponed. Even with some aspects of the inventory coming online later, the new player inventory is shaping up to be a significant improvement to the existing PMA. I hope so, because the existing PMA is not anything to write home about in a video game perspective, and what we've heard about looks really good. So a key aspect of where the new player inventory differs significantly compared to the PMA is the limits to physical space and location. While the various landing zones will have a generous amount of storage available to the player, anything left in one location cannot be accessed from another. So a player kind of has to have a home base of operations that they choose, that this is where I go, this is where I'm based. So the player will need to make sure that they transfer any items they need when exploring into their backpack or vehicle. Items purchased from shops will also be delivered to local storage. So I really do hope at some point then that, and they've already talked about this when they talked about cargo a little while ago, that you will be able to pay other players to move your stuff around too, because it's going to be very necessary, especially if you have your base of operations really far out. So on the technical side, there was a push to solve NPCs standing on chairs and benches again. Simply put, if an AI is in the process of exiting the usable as they stream out, they will now teleport to the position where they would have exited when they stream back in. So I guess this explains why sometimes you'll come into a server or you'll come into a station and some NPCs will be sitting normally and others will be standing on their chairs. And that's because while they kind of had solved the whole if they're in state A and you stream out, they'll now be in state A. It's that transition that was then causing them to still stand on chairs. So hopefully, this is an end of an era. We'll see. So in the gameplay features, so the US gameplay features team spent part of July polishing features for the Alpha 3.14 and planning for future initiatives, the former including work on Knickknacks, the player asset management for Mobiglass. As the feature's functionality nears completion, the team conducted feedback and revision sessions to begin finalizing the look and feel of the app. They'll wrap up development at the end of the quarter and are aiming to launch Knickknacks in Alpha 3.15. They will have to launch Knickknacks in Alpha 3.15. There are a lot of features in 3.15 that depend on one another. You can't really have physical inventory that does away with your bag of holding without having a new system to then see and look into it and stuff. And you can't really have any of that without having a local base of operations and a local storage in stations and stuff for it. So if one of these features get pushed, I expect them all to be pushed, and that's what we don't want, because of course 3.15 is with CitizenCon, that's the big feature show off kind of thing. So that's when we're going to be seeing it, and that's when we're going to be wanting it too. So the gameplay features also continued to focus on the latest dynamic event, the Ninetales Lockdown, working alongside QA and player experience to gather feedback and refine it before release. Okay, so for future initiatives, the designers and environment team began setting up the new shops on Horizon and planned the expo hall setup for the IAE 2951. Meanwhile, the engineers worked on the TDDs, or the technical design documents, for the cargo refactor and character archetype editor, both of which will reach the review stage soon. So by character archetype, I don't know if they are talking about players, because we have heard about the archetype system before. The archetype system is how NPCs are going to be randomly generated. When a NPC gets generated, it's not just a NPC. It has a whole list of attributes that are randomly generated, which include things like its morality, its propensity for violence, its like its fashion sense, its like what it wants to do in the game. Everything like that will be part of the archetype system. So I'm sure that that's what they're talking about here, and not necessarily you as a player determining your player's archetype, because I don't know how that would work exactly. The European gameplay feature team began finalizing the first iteration of the loot generation system. Once live, they'll look for feedback from the community for future improvements and balancing. In features vehicles, the vehicle experience team focused on the combat balance in Alpha 3.14, working closely with the community to iterate on, improve, and balance the various new features. The same went for vehicle technical team, which focused on fixing bugs and supporting their latest feature, scanning, which looks pretty decent. As for balancing and stuff, obviously they've said it's iterative and, you know, it's not really in an amazing place right now, but it's definitely in a promising place, with everything from capacitors to boost and all that stuff looking like it could really bring in a whole new way to play. So alongside supporting the other vehicle teams in fixing bugs and improving upcoming features, the vehicles feature team continued to develop the new ship HUDs alongside the UI team. So I believe this is for the manufacturer specific ship HUDs based on this new canvas slice HUDs and not just the new canvas slice HUDs. So one of the more exciting things we've helped support for Alpha 3.14 is the new thruster Dust VFX, and they've, I think, spent 2 ISCs talking about this. Driven by the VFX team, we helped with the code and functionality of this new highly detailed thruster effect system that works per thruster and changes as the thruster animates and moves around. So no longer will you see this uniform cloud ring around a ship as it lands. Now it's going to be actually determined by not only the thruster placement, but also by where you are. I mean, like, you know, if you're landing on a hangar, there isn't going to be as much dust as if you're landing on Dusty Daymar, for instance. So vehicle features also continued to develop jump points, which recently went through design adjustments to improve functionality. The team collaborated with narrative to ensure they don't stray from lore and are confident the recent adjustments will make the feature better in the long run. Internally, they also made jump points easier to work with and test, making sure they can rapidly iterate and improve the look and feel for the whole experience. The graphics and VFX programming team was very busy, apparently, with Alpha 3.14 issues such as fog popping, flashing objects and particles, and blurry UI screens and holograms requiring attention. For shaders, they made improvements to the quality of hair rendering in comm calls, though work continues, and refactored the shared code responsible for the depth pass, shadows, motion blur, and silhouette rendering. When they talk about hair rendering, with the new hair shader that we saw in 3.14, I can't expect them to be talking about the old stuff because that feels like maybe perhaps a bit strange. This will fix various bugs and prepare for some of the Gen 12 features and requirements. The reworked render-to-texture post-effect pipeline was completed and is now with the UI artists for testing. This introduces custom bloom, drop shadow, and color correction and brightness adaptation that would apply to all visors and lens user interfaces, improving the visuals and legibility. We talked about this earlier today, actually, when we were looking at the canvas sliced HUDs and how crisp that looks compared to how the helmet projected HUD that showed off your ship's health and your target's health, which was, you know, really fuzzy and just not really in that same territory anymore. The logic controlling the allocation of memory between the various UI screens was also adjusted to maximize quality while sticking to a fixed memory budget. For Gen 12, various validation issues were fixed along with issues on specific laptops where the dedicated GPU was disabled from the OS driver level. Meaning the Vulkan renderer wouldn't initialize. Several architectural amendments were also made to improve the readability and usability of the new renderer. On the VFX programming side, various new features were also added, such as tinting for space loop particles based on planetary cloud albedo, or brightness, new rotation features for particles, and the ability to attach vector fields to characters to achieve effects. The latter includes leaves being pushed around by characters' feet. So I believe that's visible in Horizon with the sakura blossoms and stuff. So in lighting, the lighting team's July included tasks for Horizon, Alpha 3.14, and adding lighting interaction into the remaining hubs. lighting interaction, including things like turning off and on the lights that you can currently see in things like the auras and habs. The Personal Manager app, or PMA's lighting was updated to make it more user-friendly when selecting clothing and armor. It's now more true to color, I believe. The blue hue still exists. There's more like a side light of blue, but you know, yellows look yellow now and that kind of thing, and it's less like, what is this supposed to look like, and you know, when you're actually browsing. And this can only be translated to knickknacks in the future, but yeah, they decided to do some work on it now anyway. It'll likely be beneficial for holograms and stuff in the future too. So work also continued on the Colonial Outpost and hospital lighting for Lorville and Grimp Hex. So finally, they started atmosphere and color grading for Pyro's planets, and moons progressed with the lighting for Pyro's jump point gas cloud. And obviously also Nyx too, because we saw that in the ISC. With narrative began the month with a mocap shoot in the UK that I talked about before to capture the first set of vendor voice packs. Thank God. This archetype was the result of working closely with the AI and audio teams, and will include lines used by the bartender and food stall vendors across the PU. Some additional lines were also recorded to support upcoming mission content. There was also a lot of discussion with the various environment teams over the upcoming outposts and hospitals currently in development. This work included write-ups for the various types of NPC encountered in these locations, and additional documentation to describe the branding, posters, and other environmental text that might be needed. Additional work was done to flesh out some of the gangs of Pyro, delving into their hierarchies, leaders, and wealth levels. The current gangs we know of are the Xenothreat, the Night Rovers, the Fire Rats, and the Overlords. 4 gangs, which is quite a lot for a system like Pyro, which is big but doesn't have that many. I mean, it has quite a few moons actually, but when you compare to things like the Stanton system, there's only 2 gangs, Nova Riders and Ninetails, right? And you don't even see much about the Nova Riders, apart from knowing what they are. So as with previous months, narrative worked closely with AI contents to outline script and character needs for some of the archetypes in development. This time, discussion focused on the security and patron behaviors. These conversations ensure that both teams are in sync when developing characters, and make sure scripts are generated using known AI triggers and context, and that the behaviors align with the intended purpose of the characters. On the dispatch front, the team released another installment of Loremakers Community Questions, where they answered questions from the forum. The recent Jump Point Vault featured a story about the crossroads of crime in Nexus. Joker returned with a new episode of Booty Call, and another update of the Galactopedia was published, including articles on Levski, Dr. Scott Childress, Whitley's Guide, and Jax McCleary. Alright. In props, the prop team spent this month working up the utilitarian variants of the medical gameplay props. Okay, it's the more rough and tumble, kind of like this is what it's for and just that alone, which is interesting because aside from being told that we have a medical gun that's dedicated, that we have a medical tool for the multi-tool, and that we have the MediPen, OxyPen, and 4 new like drugs, there was no mention about there being different styles. So I'm not sure exactly what they mean by utilitarian variants of medical gameplay props. These match the metrics and functionality of the high-tech props seen in Alpha 3.14. Okay, so set dressing within things like the hospitals. So this will be necessary for Grim Hex, because you're not going to expect an Orison gurney in a Grim Hex hospital, but have the appropriate art style to match more lawless and low-tech hospital locations such as Grim Hex. So exactly that. So you're likely to see these low-tech things in Grim Hex, Pyro, if Pyro was to have a hospital of some sort, and maybe even Maria Pure of Heart on Hurston in Lorville, because it's Lorville. So time was also spent creating new assets for Orizin's Crusader showroom, including furniture, signage, and installations. Work continued on props for the colonial outposts too. So in QA spent July making near daily publishes for Alpha 3.14, which were primarily for logging server health and making fixes. The team's development focused on the Ninetales event, with QA provided daily support for the US-based PU team along with internal playtests as needed. Towards the end of the month, this expanded to supporting the personal inventory system. On the management side, the team focused on scheduling to ensure that they have proper coverage for the upcoming Alpha 3.14 content, and coordinated with the UK studio to divide feature QATRs, or quality, they told us what this was, but I forgot what it is, and events to better fit the release schedule. They also planned what's needed for staging streams, including headcount and ownership. Systemic Services and Tools, the big guys with the small text, say in July, Systemic Services and Tools continued the development of Quantum, the economy and AI simulation. This involved improving fidelity and interaction with the game itself to provide further intelligent reasoning as to why certain service beacons spawn and why shop and fuel prices shift. The team are currently dealing with the final edge cases for the Super P Cache and Alpha 3.14 and optimizing other dependencies on the services. These guys are super important because they'll also be very, very heavily involved with all things economy, as they talked about earlier, which will be very helpful in the future because of things like being able to purchase UEC and stuff like that, and how to prevent like the economy from spiraling out of control like it does in certain games, and to keep things where you want them to be. This is the good way of doing so. Salvin, thank you for the 52 months, man. Thank you so much. So Tech Animation. So Tech Animation completed their planning for the rest of the quarter and are well underway with deliveries, including assisting in the creation and implementation of upcoming key deliverables. For example, AI combat iteration, usables, and art refinements to head assets. Additionally, the team took on some interesting challenges, one of which is to create a cross-platform RBF solder to assist in character deformation. Character deformation? So, I don't exactly know what this means. Like, character disfiguration, you know, like cutting off limbs, just like making a mess of a person, is something that I think they mentioned way back they weren't really wanting to do. We're now in 2021 and scopes change, so I wonder what this means. The mandate is to create the same code base to be used in Myre and the engine for improved usability. This will also speed up the processing of Myre, animation assets, and potentially the game too. The team also began Alembic cache animation support while existing tools already support this technology. The team needs to further integrate it into the animation toolset for a number of key deliverables. Alright then, Turbulent. So last month, Live Tools team fixed bugs and made improvements to the previously released role-based access in Hex. They also improved the crash handling pipeline and supported the publishing technology team with the Alpha 3.14 release. The game services team continued working on server meshing project alongside making supportive fixes to Hex and Alpha 3.14. Yo, Salvin, thank you for the gifted sub as well. Welcome 6il to the sub club. Thank you, man. Turbulent Web Platform team in July delivered an automation mechanism to make it easier and quicker to the platform team to ensure players have the right items in their accounts. That's always useful. They're currently working on a project to make some database functionality asynchronous using Kafka technology. The first proof of concept will be in the pledge store fulfillment processes and will make it more efficient and less prone to bugs. The UI team saw the UI feature and active feature teams work closely on the UI screens for the upcoming hospitals and healing gameplay. Once functional, they ironed out teething problems with showing a 3D skeleton on a UI screen for the first time. And I'm really looking forward to this because they make it sound like pretty neat. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just like a it's not just how you have player damage right now. You open your mobiGlas, you see like a paper doll of your character. They're talking about a 3D representation of a player, maybe as you scan them, and will move as the player moves, like you see in movies and stuff. So they also fixed bugs and completed feature requests to support other teams in Alpha 3.14. Initial design work was done for tools and reusable components, which will help less experienced designers and artists build UI screens. The UI team improved the visuals of holographic 3D items in the UI and optimized ways to display large lists without overloading the game. Work also continued on the common controls for 3D objects that can be used in future screens across the game, including the new map system. Alright. So I have no idea what Kafka is, but as long as Kafka, you know, what is Kafka? I can't even pronounce it. What is Kafka technology? Alright, so Vehicle Tech. So Vehicle Tech spent last month fixing bugs and polishing the gameplay experience for Alpha 3.14. This included addressing feedback for the radar ping and scanning features provided by the community to ensure they work at their best, particularly when searching for hard-to-find entities in space, such as faraway spaceships, minables, and other commodities. And in 3.14, it's pretty promising. I'm really looking forward to seeing where that goes. Additionally, they began preparing to expand these features to first-person gameplay, where players will be able to ping for hidden life forms on foot and then scan them for vital mission-related information. Scanning, of course, on foot will have an additional emission, which I believe will be replacing cross-section, but is audio-driven. So, like, if you sprint, if something is moving, that too will be added to that scan. So the Vehicle Tech team say it'll be nice to condense the macro-level vehicle scanning features into a more granular on-foot experience, where players will be able to perform actions on entities that are only a few meters in front of them, as opposed to dozens of kilometers away. It's pretty interesting. Finally, support began for showing player-emitted signatures and ambient levels around their vehicles on the HUD. This will give players an idea of how detectable they are and how well they can detect others. My thoughts go back to DayZ, which had something similar. Like on the corner of your screen, you had like an ear symbol, and if you were to move, the ear symbol had more bars. If you stopped, then the ear symbol would like have less bars. And that way you would know just how audible you were to zombies and maybe perhaps even other players. So this seems to be like a Star Citizen sci-fi diegetic version of that. Alright. So VFX, so July saw the VFX team continue their overhaul of vehicle radar ping effects, including making use of a new shader for the ping itself, that like X-cross thing that then highlights and washes over everything. It's a really cool effect, which is assigned to a rapidly expanding sphere highlighting any geometry it intersects. So the VFX team say we have been very encouraged by the positive reaction to this overhaul so far, because as well as looking much neater than the old version, a lot of effort went into making sure that the effects are respectful of the gameplay requirements. There is more work to be done on this for a future release though, as we want the effect to change depending on the player's choice of ping angle. Because right now, when you do it, it just highlights everything, even if your ping angle is a very narrow like cone, you know, like it should just be washing out in that narrow cone and highlighting everything in front of you instead. But the visuals of like using that ping, let's say over things like Area 18, makes it look so, it looks like Tron down there now, and it just makes it so much more visible at night too. In fact, it's a pretty promising candidate for just night vision in general, I think. They also focus heavily on bug fixing and tech debt, alongside polishing the new thruster landing dust effects for Alpha 3.14. Alright. So that's that for the monthly report for this month. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us and checking that out with us. If you were watching this on YouTube, but once again, thank you so much for watching. How did you like the new format of having the bar so you can like freely move around and that kind of thing? Let me know in the comments below. What do you guys think about all this stuff? Also, what do you guys think of this? that music. I've had it for the past, like, 10 videos. I like it, but how about no music? Let me know. What do you prefer? Alright, anyway, until next time, guys, until next month, for the next monthly report, I've been Myre. Thank you so much for watching. If you are on YouTube, please feel free to like and subscribe. That helps us and helps the channel out and that kind of thing. Also, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do so is to share us with your fellow citizens. And I'll see you next time for the next monthly report. I'll likely also go ahead and do the Squadron 42 one, but likely off stream. But yeah. Anyway, guys, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you also to our patrons who help with the YouTube stuff, and all our Twitch subscribers, who you will see on the screen sometime around now if you've stuck around until the very end. So thank you very much, everybody who's done all of that as well. Until next time, guys, as always, be good.